Hi, everyone. I'm Raghu Vatte. I'm the field CTO for AI Squared. We at AI Squared help large and small enterprises build out AI applications. And when I talk about building out AI applications, we are talking about data. We are talking about like the actual AI assets, and we are talking about the consumption layer, all three pieces. And putting all of them together and taking it out of actual labs and making it a productizable solution, and then finally productizing it. And what I mean by productizing it is like having the life cycle management around it, being able to like roll back, being able to actually be auditing everything that is happening, all the software product metrics and all the software constraints that we all know for the past few decades now also all of a sudden apply to AI based applications. And that is not an easy thing. People have not thought about it in that frame. And when they take these applications into production, then a lot of these applications don't go fully into production or like really, really stuck before getting in there because they can't do a lot of the things that like modern applications are supposed to be doing. Okay. And one of the main things is security. And we are going to be talking a lot more about security in today's webinar. I have Galeal here with me. He's the CEO of NetFoundry. Galeal, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, nice to virtually meet folks. Raghu and I have known each other for a while here. As he said, Galeal Zino, founder and CEO of NetFoundry. We do identity-first connectivity. We do identity-first connectivity for any type of application. It turns out it's the most important from both perspectives of security, compliance, regulatory on one side, and business acceleration, simplicity, business velocity on the other side for distributed applications. So, of course, we serve all types of distributed applications, but as Raghu mentioned, AI applications and in particular agentic are full of distributed APIs and resources and tools and public models and private models and data sets, data everywhere. And so our identity first connectivity plays real nicely with the type of landscape that Raghu mentioned. And as he mentioned, they put all that together nicely, and we help make sure that the connectivity aspect of that is secure and simple.
Yeah. And like you're right on point, Gail. When people think about security, right? Like people think in a classical way, you're thinking about security at rest or like security in transport. Like I have like two endpoints, and these two endpoints are going to now talk to each other, and I need to be able to secure everything between them, right? Now, when it comes to AI, what we have found out from working with our customers, large and small, is that security takes on a completely different meaning, and not everyone is ready for it. Just to give you an example, right? When people talk about securing an AI workload, an AI product, we're talking about securing an AI product where the data is residing in 10 different places, and the platform that like actually is orchestrating everything is residing in another place. Now the models themselves, some of them are foundational commercially available models, some of them are like open source models, some of them are homegrown generative and predictive models too. And you would be surprised how many of the large companies have invested heavily into generative models for just created for their own use cases, right? So now all of these things are there. And then the third piece, which is, hey, I have my users that are also completely distributed. So now when you keep drawing lines saying like, okay, I need to be able to support and secure these pathways, that is where like the complexity of the picture comes out, because now you are no longer talking about A to B, you're talking about like hundreds of different locations that you need to secure. And on top of this, when people think about AI security, they're not just thinking about data, they are thinking about context, which means that, like, okay, I need to put a guardrail somewhere, which tells me that, like, okay, if somebody is creating an application where they want some inference, the inference should fit into the company's policies. I mean, simple things as like, okay, there shouldn't be any PII, there shouldn't be any thing that really needs to actually go outside of the company to get that information, because like you do not want to corrupt your context. So everything has to be inside. Now, things also like, okay, I don't want to talk about my competitors in these applications. I do not want to have hate speech in these applications. There are few things that are very, very standard, and then there are other things that are very much specific to these companies. So what now is happening is that like not only are the data and the users and the models become endpoints to secure, but these guardrails, the compliance units, all of these are also becoming so sophisticated that they themselves are models at some point. So now you need to secure them too. So it becomes like really, really hard. And no one is going to allow a product to grow into production without checking off like every single thing, because the security teams are like, I don't want to take the risk. Somebody has to take the risk, and no one wants to take that liability, right? And that is where like security is becoming that long pull. Okay, so this is what we are seeing from our side. I would love to like know what are your experiences, because you deal with the similar set of folks from the other side of the picture too, right? And so, what are
Yeah.
your experiences?
Yeah, we were talking a little bit before the webinar started about reInvent, and I had a customer conversation at reInvent, which I'll get to in a
Mhm.
second, Raghu, because what you just described kind of echoed that conversation. Um, Before I dive into that kind of very specific use case, I do think for all the reasons you mentioned, and the old phrase "necessity is the mother of invention," um,
Exactly.
this AI connectivity problem um, is very complex and is very difficult and is very important, especially at scale. Um, I think on the flip side, what it means is AI has an opportunity to essentially leapfrog what IT has traditionally done when it comes
Mhm.
to connectivity and security. Why? Because we have to. um, so, like in the old model in IT,
Mhm.
we could kind of take certain shortcuts, right? It was a relatively centralized, relatively static world that we are connecting, and the AI world you described, like it's anything but. And so we need to take a different approach. And so like in that customer conversation at AWS, they framed it up, Raghu, almost like you did, like, hey, we have our relatively centralized orchestrator. It sits in a couple places, fine. It's a piece of software that's taken in a bunch of sessions from agents, MCPs, et cetera, et cetera. This particular enterprise wants to like bring that all in centrally before they farm it out to public models,
Mhm.
private models, tools, resources, data, whatever, whatever. Um, and they described it like you did, like, hey, like this centralized thing, or maybe two things, it needs to talk to dozens, if not hundreds, at
Mhm.
scale of different sites. And so like they asked us, like, hey, how can we possibly connect all those sites in a secure but simple way? And we said, well, hold on, hold on, hold on. Actually, you're right. You cannot connect all those
Exactly.
sites in a secure, simple way, especially not with AI sitting in the middle of it.
Mhm.
Here's the trick. The AI doesn't need network access, the orchestrator doesn't need network access to all of those databases, resources, tools, public models, private ones. It actually oftentimes needs access to a particular API, a particular set of data, a particular application. So yeah, you're right. Opening up network level access, VPN, CIDR block, TLS, like classic IT stuff. Um, yeah, you're right. That's really, really difficult. But let's talk about doing identity first connectivity, where that orchestrator, when it wants to consume an API in AKS or EKS or your private data center or whatever, we can connect that thing without actually connecting the networks between them. And then that's like a whole different conversation, right, Raghu? So
Yeah.
that's what we're seeing out there in the wild.
No, and I cannot agree with you more, right? One of the things is it's not a static picture. People are, I mean, I think even when the application is mature, you'll still have a similar problem. But right now, people are experimenting. People want to like add more and more endpoints. They are like, okay, the performance of the system is not what I want it to be. I want to tweak these five different things to make it more performant. I want it to be more accurate. I want the latency to decrease. And when people want to do that, they are going to go and talk to newer assets. They might be want to like go to a different model. Or a different hosting provider because their performance is better. Now, when you go into the production mode and then start telling your IT, like, okay, I want this to be open today, and like I want it in like one day, I want it and close it afterwards because I'm done experimenting. It's not a production worthy system at that point, right? Like people are not going to take it. And the other thing that we are seeing on our side is the data points themselves are not static. It might be that the agent decides that it's going to call a tool that is sitting somewhere else. Okay, you have like 20 different MCPs that are like all part of your ecosystem, and not everything needs to be opened for every application. And the agent is going to decide which tool to use, and then now it is going to go towards that. And all of a sudden, either you have to open up the whole world, which no one wants to do, or make it very, very strict, which means that like you are going to slow down the whole process. You're going to slow everything to a crawl, where
Mm.
people are just going to question the efficacy of the whole system, and they are going to say, hey, do I really need all of these things to get that insight? Why can't I go and ask somebody about that insight, right? And we are actually seeing those things, and AI is one of those things where like the burden of proof is on the application right now,
Mm.
especially because what are the social impacts of having this one? The burden of proof is on the application, and everyone wants their application to prove that it is like really good, it is performance, and more importantly, there is a return on investment that is justifiable. And when, I mean, I don't want to say security is the only thing that is slowing it down, but security and compliance together, along with others, are like the big blocks that needs to be solved. And I'm really happy, like when we were talking earlier about like how we both can come together to solve this problem. And first of all, you guys having a solution for that problem itself is a great thing to begin with. And then how AI Squared and NetFoundry can partner together to like solve this problem and provide value to our customers is something great. I just want you to like explain more in terms of the security angle because you live that life day to day. What are you saying? How do you think this market is going to evolve, and how does NetFoundry play a role in that one?
Yeah, let me a topic I'm happy to talk about. Let me quickly, Ragu, go back to one of your statements. Is really interesting. I mean, listen, you guys are some of the world's foremost experts in taking a project from, a spark in someone's eye to an idea to a concept to a prototype to POC to production, and you kind of walk that path a little bit. I'm curious how often or how do you see that change? In other words, like your example of like, hey, like at the end of the day, we're asking the AI to essentially execute a set of objectives, to figure out how to execute a set of objectives. And to
Mhm.
do so, it might need different tools, different data, different models, like different things. Like when you look at some of your initiatives and some of these huge customers that you've helped from concept to like prod, in reality, how much does that change? Like, how different is the world of data that it talks to on day one compared to day final, where day final is production?
Day and night,
Hmm.
right? First thing is because the data that you have access in POCs, pre-production, let's call it like different stages, is going to be different because like no one wants to give out like production data or like access to production data first. The second thing is no one wants to replicate this. These are like huge data sets. And people are like very conscious about their data because data is the moat. At this point, that is the goal, right? Like, okay, if I have a lot of data, then I have an advantage over other folks who don't have that data. I can get like better insights. I can actually execute better, all of these kind of things. So that is where we are seeing that the data and the connectivity needs for this data is completely different, whether it is inside the POC or in production. But one thing is that like once it gets into production, it's like it starts to behave more and more as a very classic software where the need for the connectivity exists, but everyone is afraid of like opening up the whole network. to that data. No one wants to do that. There is no real reason to do that. Like you rightfully said, they just want to talk to a particular API endpoint, not the whole network, right? So that is what we see.
Yeah. Okay. So on the connectivity and security side of that, Raghu, we see very similar. I'll just call it pre-prod type customer examples. As you said, experimentation is important, speed's important, velocity is important, but they do need to meet security, compliance, visibility, control. So in a sense, what we're usually doing there is providing a very basic, just call it an enclave, um,
Mm-hmm.
almost snow fences that says, okay, like here is the domain that the agents or MCPs or both or orchestrators, here's the domain they can talk to. Here's the APIs they're allowed to hit. Here's the data they're allowed to touch in this manner. And this is just a set of identity-based policies. Uh, Most of the times, Regu, we're providing the identity as part of our solution,
Mm-hmm.
usually in the form, ideally, it's like an X509 certificate that, sits inside a trust enclave in your compute. In other words, it's like proof of possession identity, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's super cool because now, like the AI server or MCP server, we know very definitively who it is, right? So unless you've hacked the silicon to get
Yes.
into the TE environment or whatever's there, we have a pretty good shot. And of course, you can layer on other factors of
Mm-hmm.
identity authentication. You can see enterprise IDP, et cetera. But for like the dev use case, Regu, usually folks are just like, oh, cool. You can give an identity to my agents, my MCP servers, et cetera, without me having to integrate with the enterprise IDP or do this MFA thing or terrific. That meets my needs for the dev environment. Um, the policies then become very simple because now we have an identity, and without having to get into things like IP addresses and CIDR blocks and NAT and CNAT, we can simply say, okay, cool, this agent with this identity, which again is hopefully a proof of possession identity, it can talk to, let's just say, this API, this five tuple, this resource, this tool, this, and that's all it can talk to. So it's like positive security model instead of negative, right? So like instead of opening it up to everything, and then trying to restrict what it can talk to, which, worked fairly well in the IT world. Our belief is, and what most of our customers say is like, hey, that doesn't work in an AI world because these things are not deterministic. And we don't really know what it's going to do if we gave it full network access to all these things. So, no, no,
Exactly.
we will define exactly what it can do. And if the instrumentation, telemetry, et cetera, if it exposes that like it quote unquote wants access to something else, then we'll decide whether to add that thing to the policy or not. So that's generally what we're seeing starting in, call it pre-prod, regu, these type of environments. As it goes closer to maturity, then what we're usually seeing is like they're starting with our basic identity policy, et cetera, that we provide. But now they have some other constraints. Maybe they can't touch all the devices or can't touch all the databases or these type of things. So now it might make sense to leverage a third-party identity, something like Spiffy Spire, which we integrate with. Maybe it's an enterprise IDP. Maybe it's a third-party CA if it's like an IoT device or something like this. So we just kind of build on top of that platform as we go from dev to prod.
Oh, perfect. And in your experience, do your customers or when they go from dev to prod, do they have to redo the whole thing, or like because they have gained so much experience using the policies and everything, do they just add on top of it? Because the identity that you mentioned doesn't really change, even if you're integrating with a third party, or even if you are integrating with so you are doing a lot of work ahead, which is anyway needed on the prod, and then you are going to add more and more layers that are needed in the prod. Is that a right way of understanding?
Yeah, you're so spot on, Raghu. So what's happening is even in pre-prod, you're defining what identities can talk to what things and in what way, right? What ports,
Mhm.
protocols, whatever. It turns out that once that goes to prod, it's the same thing. The only difference is instead of like a dev Postgres, a dev database, a dev tool, a dev resource, it's now the prod equivalent. And because we've created a overlay network that doesn't care about IP addresses and NAT and firewalls, et cetera. It's just connecting identities. Okay,
Hmm.
fine. Now instead of hashtag dev uh, database, let's say Postgres, whatever, whatever, now it's hashtag prod database, whatever, whatever, right? So seamless transition to production. Of course, Regu, like, okay, not every prod environment completely mirrors the dev environment, unfortunately. Like we both know like how that works. But you definitely have a huge head start, and you know what the policies and you know what the identities should look like in prod.
Okay, perfect. And like it is, I mean, there are so many parallels, both in terms of the security needs, but also in terms of the overall product needs too, right? So when what we see from our side is that when you are in the prod, the kind of requirements that are needed or put in place are different from when you are in your labs or in a pre-prod or in a dev environment. But if we don't put in the discipline, especially that is needed for security and compliance to be like done in prod during the dev environment, what we find is that like once you go to prod and like completely try to redo a new scheme there, it just falls flat on the ground because like people don't think like that, right? Like, okay, you go through steps and like whatever is in the dev, like whatever you worked on the dev should go into the next step, into the POC, into prod. And that is what like is very important, and that is one of the things that I really liked about your solution, is that like you're not redoing things, and like thanks for confirming that, but like you're not redoing things. What you're building on is you're using that again over and over again, and you're just building on top of it. And by the time it gets to prod, it is almost battle tested by the time, which is also very important. Having a security layer is great, but in AI world, how do you verify that the security is working? How do you do that? That is like becoming a really big question in itself. And I want to I want to hear your opinion in terms of like, what is it that you are seeing on that front?
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Even if you zoom out, Gandhi Koprathi, maybe he was the first person to say, or maybe one of them, I'm not sure, but he's brilliant, right? So like he has this saying about basically like where's AI going to work or not work? It's going to work with, first of all, it's going to work with things you can verify. Like if you can verify it, then you can use AI for it. It's the same thing for connectivity and security, right? So we just had this again. It was a different conversation at reInvent, but another conversation at reInvent. It was borderline funny, and I think this is back to my leapfrog comment. So the dev team, the AI ML team, which by the way was like one of many AI ML teams in this large enterprise, they had done their thing and it worked. It was for a particular app, and the story they told us was like they proved what they had to prove. They were getting ready to deploy their app. They went to the prod team. The prod team is used to talking to a whole bunch of these research teams, right? And so the prod team was like, yeah, okay, we can probably get you in 3 to 6 months. But please be aware, all the stuff you're doing in dev, we're not going to let you do in prod. We're not opening inbound firewall ports for you. We're not doing any permitted IP addresses. You do need identity. You do need authentication. You do need least privilege access. Like you need the and this team, because they had done secure by design, right? Because they had started with all this stuff, they're like, actually, we already have all those things. I don't need a single open inbound port in front of your databases. I don't need new permissions in your VPCs and VNets. I don't need this. I don't need this, because we already have it because we did it from day one. And the way they described it to us, I mean, we weren't in the room, right? But the way they described it to us was, the prod team was kind of shocked because they're like, well, that's if you did what you're saying you did. If you've really done identity first connectivity, you've done kind of the zero trust type stuff. You don't need open fire. Like, why would you do that in a dev environment? You must have been like wasting your time. Like none of our other teams do that stuff, right? And they were kind of like, uh, it turns out if you do secure by design, it actually resulted in better velocity for us, right? Not just during the dev phase, right? But now that we're talking to you. So like that was like a perfect antidote, Raghu, I think to kind of describe what where you are is I think AI writ large can leapfrog by almost taking a DevOps, shift left, whatever terminology you want to use approach. And I know like you guys do a ton of this on the AI side. We do a ton of this on the connectivity and security side. So that legitimately you do secure by design from day one, and it helps you on day two, day three, day four, day five.
Oh, yeah, can't agree with you more on that. Like you do have to have that that discipline and secure by design, like right at the beginning, along with all the other things that like you do when you are building AI applications. Everything from hey, I want to secure my endpoints. I want to secure my messages. Everything. Also to compliance and like I want to audit these things. I want if there is a security risk somewhere like I want to know immediately, right? Like, and how do I audit them? How do I put all of this into one place that can be like actually used by the end users in the way they are used to using it? One of the things that we see is that even when we give all of these tools, the NOCs or the ESOC teams, they're using their tools, right? Like they're not going to go and like report their tools and say like, oh, here is a new toy, like I'm going to use that. That's not going to happen. So one of the things we did from the AI Squared, and we did it right at the beginning, is that like we took these applications, whether it is the applications themselves, whether it is monitoring, whether it is infrastructure visibility, all of these things, and then we are now able to like include it as part of our customers' dashboards, okay, or our customers' applications. So we are kind of infusing AI into legacy systems. I don't like to call them legacy systems. Like I've worked on them, so I'm just calling myself legacy at that point. But like these great systems, but like okay, we are infusing AI and the new technology into those things, and that is what is really really helping. At the end of the day, people want these AI applications to be out in the open. They want to experiment. They want to see whether it is worth having these applications. But solving those problems of taking the hurdles out for these product teams, for the people who are developing it, taking the hurdles out, even for people who are using it, right? That becomes the biggest challenge. That is becoming the biggest challenge. We have gone out of, hey, my model, I need to have a model. And like that is the biggest challenge at some point a few years back, right? Now we are moving away from that. It's still a very hard problem to solve, but we are moving away from, hey, is my AI asset ready to, is my product ready? And that's a completely different way of thinking. And my product ready means you have to go back and like do everything that we have been doing for a few decades. And that is exactly one of the things too is like I love about what you guys are doing is like the kind of experience in your company. I can see when I look at it, like you have seen the transformation and the movement of evolution of this technology right from the olden days to the new age cutting edge thing, right? So and you're getting all that information back, all that experience back and putting it back into your product. That's exactly what we are doing on our side too, like so much experience of building AI systems but also building large products and taking them to market and like having successful products. That is something that like you cannot just get in a day or two. Like you need to have those battle scars to know that like okay, we have to do it in a certain way, we should not do it in a certain way, right? Uh, I know we have been talking for a very long time. Okay, we are almost at 30 minutes in. I want to give some time for Q&A, but before we go there, anything that you want to close this out with?
Yeah, no, I think your last point was important, right, Raghu? I mean, you and I and a lot of our colleagues are legacy, we're vintage, we're dated. We've been doing this 20, 25, 30 years. But the pace, Raghu, I mean, that's what continues to astound me. I remember at the start when I first looked at it, where I was like, oh, cool. I'm going to put a lot of effort into taking like all this data that I have and stick it into vectorized databases so that I can then, have some AIs act on it, right? And like, okay, granted, I'm doing this like in my spare time or whatever, but like I'm like just starting that, and before I know it, like that's not necessary anymore. And then like to your point, the models are definitely not the bottleneck anymore. In fact, Now most of our customers are like, okay, I want to be able to route between different models, and I want to use a local model
Yes.
for
Yeah.
this. I want to use that model for this. I want to do some local, so the pace of it is just crazy, and it's exciting. And we love nothing better than to help our customers achieve their actual business outcomes. And they're doing it. They're doing it with AI squared. They're doing it with AI. And so our feeling is if we can take connectivity and security out of the critical path, like make that stuff not be friction, and then go a step
Yes.
further and make it so that connectivity security actually becomes like competitive advantage because it
Mhm.
enables you to have a high velocity um, organization with business continuity, with security, with compliance. Like that's what our goal is. So we're very happy with the way this pace is going.
Oh, perfect. I can't agree with you more. I do see like a bunch of questions on on the
Oh
Q&A,
wow.
and there are also some questions on the chat. So let me start with the one in the chat. And for attendees, please list your questions on the Q&A section, and like we'll go through all of them. Uh, we have we have some time to like go through them. So, but David Austin asks, how does zero trust play out in the AI for development to production? I think we answered some of it, but like, do you want to like talk a little bit more about it, Gil?
Yeah, I mean, since it was started with dev, I'll just give you an example that we didn't cover, and I'll just kind of scratch the surface here, and then David, of course, you can follow up with us to get deeper, or even better, follow up with our experts, our engineers. But like just starting from dev, what's kind of interesting is if you think from day one in a manner like a lot of our customers are, and like Raghu and I are describing, the thought process is kind of like, well, can I put secure connectivity inside, almost as like a primitive or a library, like inside my agent or my MCP server or my gateway or whatever, my orchestrator, whatever I'm developing. So David, like our most innovative customers are doing exactly that, right? If they're developing a Golang application, they're taking our Golang SDK, or if they're a Python application, they're monkey patching their Python. So that basically just very high level, um, without an extra client or gateway or this type of thing, their application based on identity and policies can now manage its own connectivity, so to speak. And then from the perspective of the security team, that's an operations team that's absolutely fantastic because now basically instead of having to try to do network-based segmentation or micro-segmentation, add in other things for identity, authentication, authorization, et cetera, which is almost mission impossible, as Raghu and I were talking about with this distributed dynamic deterministic data. The app, again, the agent you're coding, the MCP, whatever it is, it knows what it needs to talk to. So like with the SDK approach, you get kind of like a native built-in microsegmented overlay network, like super, super cool. So if that's where your question was headed, we're happy to follow up with you to go deeper. Or if you're headed somewhere different, then ping us and we'll talk about that as well.
Perfect. Um, so the next question that I have for someone looking to set up security protocols in our products, how can one start, and what are the first steps you would suggest? So let me take this first, and then like I will give you to expand on it. Uh, the first thing, like what we talked about in this in the past 30 minutes, is like you need to think about security to begin with, right? In terms of like how you're productizing anything. If you are connecting to a certain asset, then is that it's not about like, can I connect first and then can I overlay a security on top of it? It is like, can I connect using a secure connectivity right from the beginning? When you start thinking like that, then you will start thinking about every connectivity, right? Like it is not just about connecting to databases. It is about like agents talking to each other, or your MCPs coming into picture. And there are more and more MCPs that are going to come into picture. Only I would say like only 5% of the applications have an MCP server, if it works today. But like people are convinced that like this is the way to go, and more applications are all going to have their own MCP servers or like consolidated and everything else. So things are going to pop up, And your product should actually have a way of talking to a new endpoint without figuring out, do I need to secure it afterwards, kind of a model. Like you need to put the security right into the connectivity, and like you should put that architecture in place. Now, where do you start? First steps, would you suggest? Again, don't try to boil the ocean. I mean, it's a very cliched kind of a response, but like it is true. If you are going to talk to your model endpoints, if you are going to talk to your databases, if you are going to talk to users that are coming from different segments, then start there. Okay, those are the things that fall into the classical model, which gets you to that 80, 70, 80% of security posture that you want to assume. And then the rest is going to be more complicated. But if you have the architecture in place to handle those things, then you don't have to reinvent the wheel after you have done this 70%. You have to go back and say, like, okay, like what Gary was talking about. If you know that like you are going to talk to an API endpoint, and you know that that API endpoint is going to change or expand in the future, then opening up a network port or having a very static connectivity profile on that is not going to cut it anymore, right? And like you need to go look at newer ways of implementing that. And this is where the zero trust comes into picture. It has to be built into your product. So that's my 2 cents. But like Galil, do you want to expand on that?
I think that's perfect, Raghu. In the spirit of keep it in simple, I would say start with identity.
Yep.
Strong identity, strongly authenticated for the AI, specifically for the AI agent, for the MCP, et cetera, as you described, Raghu. That simple thing, in other words, not an IP address, and sometimes this is not popular in our customer conversations where they're
Mhm.
like, no, we have an IP address, we have an identity. Or we'll use Raghu's, we'll use the user's token, assertion, credential, et cetera. I'm sorry, it's not good enough. Um, we know what happens with identity theft of human identities. Uh, so, forgetting even that, an AI agent is not the same as a human. It needs its own identity, authentication, authorization. To me, that's the absolute starting point. And then we can start talking about the deeper zero trust stuff, Regu, that you just hinted at.
Mhm. So we have a bunch of questions. So in lieu of time, like I'm going to summarize some of them. And if we did not get to your questions, please feel free to like reach out to us. You can reach out to us using our corporate websites, or you guys know us on LinkedIn. Hit us up on LinkedIn. Like okay, that is not a problem. Um, the next question that I want to tackle is, what specific enterprise problems does combined story solve, and neither company can solve as well alone? This is a great question. This is a very interesting question. So one thing I would say from AI Squared's perspective is that like when we talk about, when we go into that production readiness meeting, we have a production readiness meeting that we do almost in parallel to like when our POC starts. We are like, okay, we are POC starting, and then like, are we also going to get ready for production? And if those two things don't match up, then like we can make changes right at the beginning, right? When we talk to them about like, hey, have you secured these endpoints? People have two reactions. One is, no, I don't think we need to. Okay. Then we have to educate, like, okay, even though it is inside your corporate perimeter, you still need to secure these parameters, because it is not about other people trying to like gain access to your assets. It's also about, sorry, let me rephrase it. It's not only about other people trying to gain access to your assets. It's also about your agents or the AI assets that you have built behaving properly and making sure that they don't gain access to other things that they are not supposed to. And now all of a sudden, it is, if you take a human example, I'm inside a company, okay? You're trying to protect other people from like hacking into my systems, but you're also trying to protect my systems from trying to go and hack into other systems in the same place inside the company. And that knowledge, once people start thinking about it like that, saying that this is an AI agent, that is new software that I am implementing into my corporate environment, And I really need to like gain trust about this software. And for me to do that, I need to put some security around it. Once people start thinking about it, they get it. And then they say, like, yes, we want to do it, right? And then the next question is, oh, this is so hard to do, right? And that is where, like, I would say, without a solution like NetFoundry, we at AI Squared are like now handicapped. We are going to go in and say, like, we just educated people saying that you need something, and then when they turn around and ask us, okay, this is very hard to implement. This is going to like increase my project time from like 2 months to 4 months. I really do not have an answer. And I think like that is where the partnership is so much more powerful than individuals. That is my view of the world when it comes to the security. And we want to make it as easy as saying that when somebody goes into AI squared and they say, hey, I want to use a particular model, then there is an overarching policy that is set that like every time you go connect to something, it has to follow the zero trust principles. And what we can do is like because of the integration, everything can be automatically set up. And when that happens, it is no longer a burden for people. It is definitely a security principle that they are following. It is also a very important thing that they need to do right at the beginning during the POC stage or even in the dev stage, right? They have to think about it, they have to implement it. But now it is not a huge lift for them. It is almost like going into the orchestrator and creating a policy and saying like we want to do this. And what we want to do is like make it as simple as possible where like it almost becomes transparent. Somebody at a higher level decides that at an admin level, this application has to have a certain security posture and everything else flows through without the dev and uh, the development teams and also the operations teams have to like take care of each and every single piece. That is what is the power of this combination for me. Khalil, you want to add anything to that or?
We're on the same page. At the end of the day, our combined customers have a business outcome that they're looking to get to. They want to be effective in getting that outcome. They want to be quick in getting to that outcome. And they want it to be like in your words, Raghu, right? They want to be as frictionless as possible. So if I look at what AI Squared does in terms of all the hard work you're doing kind of behind the scenes for data integration and all hard data problems you're solving to make it easier for your customers to be able to take AI into their workflows and to be able to leverage their data in what are very sophisticated ways, but that you make it simple for the customer. We're just doing the same thing on the connectivity, networking, and security behind that, right? So like I feel like combined, to use the old Staples like easy button analogy, right? Like combined, yes, AI Squared and NetFoundry have done a lot of sophisticated work, but the reason we do all that work is to make it so much simpler for the enterprise to actually be able to achieve the business outcome they're looking for.
And at the end of the day, they need to be able to do it very, very quickly so that iterate and experiment, especially because it's a new paradigm that they are trying out, right? And unfortunately, we are at 2:45. There are a couple of questions out there, like I would love to answer, but like we are running out of time. So please hit us up on LinkedIn or on our corporate websites, and like we'll be able to get back to you with the answers. Uh, One thing I do want to like mention is that like between AI Squared and NetFoundry, we have worked together and created uh, a a solution brief, and a white paper along with it. And we are going to distribute the white paper for all the registrants of this webinar. Please keep an eye out for that. It should be in your inboxes very, very soon. Okay? So that is, and thanks for the time. And also, great questions. Hopefully, like we are able to impress upon you that like security is not an afterthought, and AI security is a lot more complicated. I don't even want to say it's complicated. It is newer. It is different, right? And we at AI Squared and NetFoundry are taking those steps to make it as easier for our users, end users, because without making that happen, it's just going to become one of those big roadblocks that is going to like make the productionization or productization of these AI applications longer, more expensive, and at the end of the day, reduce the ROI that they are going to bring in. Yeah. So, Galeal, you want to like close this out?
Yeah, I wouldn't add anything to that. I'll also thank folks for all the questions. Sorry we couldn't get to, I mean, I'm just scanning these, right? Like lots of great questions that like we'd love to talk about. But as Raghu said, ping us, we'll have the white paper come in, and we'll continue this conversation. I appreciate all the participation and great questions. Thank you guys.
Thanks, everyone.